Hey everyone, Dino Monoxelos here. In this clip, we're going to talk about setting gain structure on a couple of different Ampeg heads. Now as you can see, I've got 1 amp from each of the 3 different series of Ampegs here. The Heritage SVT-CL, the SVT-7PRO, and a Portaflex PF-500. Now the principle of setting your gain structure is pretty much the same regardless of what amp you're using here. The idea is to get the right amount of signal into your amp without overdriving the preamp. And this is a pretty important thing that we as bass players sometimes forget when we first plug into an amplifier to set our volume and EQ. Too much signal into the amp and we're going to cause it to overdrive and distort. And in some cases this may be an effect that we're looking for, and we'll talk about that a little bit further down the road. Not enough signal into the amp, and let's face it, your amp's going to sound wimpy. Yes, that's right, I said wimpy. 2 words you never want to use in the same sentence: Ampeg and wimpy. So that's why it's important to make sure that your gain structure is set up right. The 7PRO and the PF-500 actually have peak indicator lights that tell you exactly when you're sending too much signal into the amp or not enough signal. The CL's a bit different though, so we're going to start there. Now what I usually do with the CL is I'll run the master volume anywhere between 3/4 and full up and adjust my overall volume with the gain control. Now I know this might be a bit counterintuitive regarding most amps, but this gives us the closest representation of a vintage SVT or an SVT VR, which neither of have a master volume control or a gain. They just have a volume control. It's basically a wide open 300 watt SVT at this point. But this is where you need to use your ears and your good judgment, because if you feel that you're not getting enough gain into the preamp and your volume's way too loud, then you need to bring your master volume down to allow you to bring your gain control up to get more signal into your amp to a proper level. In some cases, if you are looking for that overdriven sound that we had talked about earlier, you can do just the opposite. You can bring your master volume all the way down, dime your gain up, and then adjust your overall volume with your master volume. And this gives you that overdriven, gritty sound. Now this really won't hurt or damage anything other than you might go through preamp tubes a bit faster than normal. Now, in the case of the 7PRO or the PF-500, which do have peak indicator LEDs, here's how I go about setting my gain on these amps. First off, before I do anything, I always make sure that my EQ is set completely flat and my master volume is turned all the way down. Then, I just simply play an open A string or an open E string as hard as I would during a performance and adjust my gain control until the red LED comes on, and then I back it off. Now if you notice, my gain control's turned all the way down at this point and my peak LED is still coming on. So this is telling me I've got too much signal going into the amp even with the gain completely off. So what I want to do is I just want to engage my minus 15 dB pad and go from there. I'll play an open A string as hard as I would during a performance, and then I'm going to bring up my gain control until I see that peak LED come on. Okay? And then I'm just going to back it off some. So now I know I've got the right amount of signal going into my amp. Same thing goes for the PF-500. I'm plugged in, my master volume's turned all the way down, my EQ set flat, and I'm gonna play and adjust my gain control just until that peak LED indicator comes on, and then I'm gonna back it off. So there we go, it's coming on, and now I'm just gonna roll it off a little bit. Okay, now I know I'm good. Now one thing I should mention is, this is all done with the EQ set flat. We all know we're going to want to tweak our sound. That's why we put an EQ on the amp in the first place. But just remember, anytime you dial in your sound, whether you're boosting or cutting any of the frequencies, you're going to need to compensate on your gain control. For instance, check it out. My EQ set flat, but watch what happens to the peak LED indicator when I turn my bass up. See how it automatically comes on? That's because I'm adding gain to my signal. Okay, so I'm going to need to compensate my gain control by bringing it down a little bit. And there we go. Okay, so why do I have you set your EQ flat before you set your gain control, that just puts you in the ballpark of where your gain control should be. Once you dial in your sound with your master up and your stage volume and whatnot, then you'll need to go back and tweak your gain control just a hair to compensate for what you did in the EQ section. I hope this gives you a little bit of insight on setting proper gain structure. Remember, 3 different amps, but the concept remains the same throughout all 3 amps. Obviously the CL is a little bit different than the 7PRO and the 500 like we had shown, but the concept is still the same. And not just on amplifiers, whether you're running live sound for your band or you're just working in your project studio at home, gain structure is the key to it all. Remember, good gain structure allows for proper EQ, plenty of headroom, and great tone on your part. As always, guys, play more bass.